know from reading about you and the fantastic work done by Beat that you really do fill a niche. And so it's a great privilege for us to have you here. I understand you turned your beeper off, so are unlikely to be called out. So at least we have your presence here for an hour or so. So you started your life, I believe, as a GP. Well, not your life, your professional activities as GP in Penrith and Eden in 1992. Worked as a GP partner at Birkbeck Medical Group in Penrith until 2016. Worked here also in Glenreading. In 1993, joined the Patterdale Mountain Rescue Team, which sadly you had to retire from after a certain while when the joints got a bit creaky. In 2004, he joined the Great North Air Ambulance as one of their doctors, but stood down in December 2023 after 20 years of service. And when he came back to Birkbeck practice, he set up, I don't know whether it's just yourself or that was your personal initiative, but you set up the doctors, the Beat group that attend road traffic accidents and other serious emergencies. It's called Beat Doctors. It's existed for 30 years. It's received many honours. You yourself have received honours. So it's a fantastic package that we're going to hear about tonight. We'll just, as per normal, he will give his talk. I hope all the technology works. And then we'll have a Q&A session and then close down. So I will just pause for a second there and then ask you if you wouldn't mind to take the floor. Thank you very much, Susie.
Great. Good evening. Nice to see you all, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me along tonight to talk about a subject which, as Tim says, I'm very, very passionate about and have been doing for the last 30 years. So it's hard cramming the last 30 years experience into a 45-minute talk, but I'll do my best, hopefully, to give you a flavour of what this is all about. And obviously there'll be time for questions at the end. I hope that is the Zoom working okay and the sound and everything. Is that all right? So I'm going to talk, it's about emergencies in pre-hospital care, but particularly emphasising the role of doctors in pre-hospital emergency care, because that's something which doesn't come as standard in the UK, unfortunately, as yet. It does abroad. If you go abroad and you have an accident, and you get fortunate to have a car crash in France, you get SAMU, which has a doctor with it. It doesn't happen in this country. All doctor services pre-hospital are all part of charities. So I'm going to talk about particularly this area where it started off in Penrith and the Eden Valley and around Ullswater, the Beat Doctors, and also my other passion, which is the air ambulance and flying with them, and mountain rescue, which, as Tim very kindly said, I have been a member of as well, but I'm getting a bit creaky, need a bit of WD-40 in my joints at the moment, and decided I was no longer fit enough to trape up the fells. So yeah, this is a bit of a summary about my medical career. So I trained at Charing Cross, and I did my GP training in Northampton, and then in 1992 I came to Penrith as one of the full-time partners there. I stood down from that in 2000, and it says there, I can't hurry, 2015. And since then, I've been doing local work, including here at the lovely practice in Glenreading, which has been absolutely fabulous. I found that the busy practice at Penrith was getting a bit too stressful for me. So, and I was reaching the end of my career, I needed to chill back a bit. So I came to work at Glenreading and Shap and Kirkoswald, these lovely little community practices, which have restored my faith in general practice, I have to say. It's a lovely practice. And also, you know, did mountain rescue for a few years. Big dogs I'll talk about in a minute. And one thing I haven't mentioned is the thing at the bottom there, which is I'm part of the Northwest Ambulance Service Major Incident Response Team, and I've been with them since they set that up about 10 years ago. So I've got a little video to give you an idea of what this is all about. So we'll start playing with the sound. 3, 2, 1.
The Street is an incredibly beautiful place, but if you have a medical emergency, it can be done. What we look at, data potentially, smashed up. It's so remote, it takes 90 minutes to get to the nearest trauma centre. And that's where the unique team of voluntary doctors come in. We can do most of the procedures that we can do in A&E. It's challenging in A&E, let alone in the back of an ambulance, in a bridge, on a roadside, in the pouring rain, in the snow. I, along with a few others, set up the Beat Fund about 25 years ago. And we do this completely voluntarily. We don't pay for it. We have 9 doctors on call 24/7, covering huge areas of Cumbria. So my name is Alex. I'm one of the GP based over in Carlisle in North Cumbria, but almost maybe pushing back to the community, and Beat was just absolute opportunity to do that. Ultimately, it goes back to why develop a colour doctor, and it's that old cliche of
my name is Sarah Curry, and I'm a consultant in emergency medicine at the Cumberland Infirmary. I mean, I like it when people call me youngster, even though I'm probably older than most of them, but yeah, I'm used to recruit. The next step for me is advanced driver training. Anyone who knows me is probably qualified by that. I'm John Ferris, I'm a consultant in emergency medicine and pre-hospital care based in Cumbria. So often these events are in the communities we live in and can involve people that we know in the communities. It can be quite emotionally draining. And it's one brother 72, on scene at this RCC, one male, major trauma, unconscious, badly trapped, and you couldn't do anything. I find it that example of one thing someone said they said on scene, however, no one's told about that, the sound of our voice. It's serious. So you get the car and we go. We go to a whole range of serious incidents. One of them started to feel that was normal, and just one lapse of concentration, I just dropped my hand in the machine. Got my hand and just clean took it off. It was just like snapping a carrot. That was when the plane started, and that's when I was kind of crying for it to be knocked out, but nothing could happen until Theo turned up. I was able to give him a large dose of a drug that paramedics are not normally allowed to use, called ketamine, which pretty much put him into a sort of stupor in order for us to get him pain-free and also to align the arm in the right sort of anatomical position. Because of that, we gave his arm a fighting chance. Thankfully, he has managed to save his forearm and is using it to a fairly good effect.
What's your feeling towards the Theo now?
Just look forward to it and thanks, and it doesn't really matter what you can say, it's not really, you know. It's very important we have them really fun values, because of that extra level of super qualified people that just drop everything and come at the blink of an eye, and it's that next level that makes all the difference.
So there's a donation for the Beat Fund.
Wow,
fantastic. Thank you for everything you've done.
So thank you so much for that. It's great. So thank you. Very well for us to see you today, looking like this, with your arm still attached and working. It's just amazing. It has been enormously rewarding. There are many cases of people throughout the years that have survived, but would probably not have survived without our input. Once things get opened up again, I can see the Lake District in this area become incredibly busy, probably the busiest we've ever seen.
So just a little rider on that. That was filmed during lockdowns. You can gather they're talking about things opening up. Thankfully, things have opened up again now. Things are back to being incredibly busy. Young George, the farmer in that film there, was very lucky that he still got his arm. Basically, he was feeding grass into one of these machines with sharp blades in that chops everything up into small bits. And where he was standing, he slipped. He hadn't turned it off, and his arm fell into the machine, and it literally went right through his forearm, all but the major blood vessel that goes down the inside of your arm, called the ulnar artery, and a bit of skin, went through both bones, all his tendons, all his ligaments, all the other blood vessels, all got severed, and his arm was facing the wrong way round, and he managed to get hold of it He was on his own. It was 10 o'clock at night. There was no air ambulance, and he managed to get hold of it and run into the kitchen and collapse on the floor in a pile of blood. The paramedics had got there, put tourniquets on. I got there, and as the film said, basically knocked him out with a heavy dose of ketamine, so he was pain-free and not aware of what was going on. Turned his arm, put it in the right place, put it in a splint, took the tourniquet off so that the blood supply would feed what remained of his arm. And we just went up across, he was at Gamblesby near Melmerby, and we went up across Alston, that crossroads, across the Pennines there, through Hexham to the RBI in Newcastle, phoned ahead and told them what was coming. And he spent 9 or 10 hours in surgery, having microvascular surgery and neurosurgery and so on. And they managed to save his arm. So as you can see, he's pretty much got 95% function back in his arm. And if I hadn't been there, if we hadn't had a doctor service there, the crews would have had to take him to Carlisle with it as it was, with no blood supply to it, and probably would have lost his forearm. So he'd have ended up with a prosthesis, which as a farmer would have been a disaster for him. So as it is, back farming, driving his tractors, using his arm, it was an enormous success story. So these are one of the reasons why we do what we do. So just coming back to my talk, the sad fact is that unfortunately we get 3,000 to 4,000 people die, particularly on our roads, but of major trauma every year, and about 10 times that number are seriously injured with major trauma. There was a study done a few years ago by the military looking at people with this sort of level of severe injury. They looked at people that were injured in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, people who've been shot, blown up by IEDs, things like that, who had major trauma. Thankfully, we don't have that in this country, but we do have people with that level of injury. So they compared those people that were blown up or shot with people that were very badly traumatized with car crashes and things. And they compared the two to see what the mortality rate was in those groups. And the mortality rate for people with these what we call high injury severity scores in the war zone, that's number of the patients they saw, only 7% died. Anybody give an idea as to, in this country, what the mortality rate would be for that level of trauma? Just shout out a number. 60. 60? You're not far off. It is 60%. have you read that article? Oh, well done. that's bang on. I've never had anybody say 60. Usually people say, oh, 10, 20%, that sort of thing. It's shocking. I mean, it's a shocking fact that in this country where we've got, it's not a war zone, thank God, we've got decent hospitals, although they're a bit overcrowded and a bit overpressurized, we've still got decent hospitals, and yet mortality from people with very severe injuries is 60%. It's shocking. And the reason for that is because in the war zones, the military people, their model of treating people is to take a doctor and a paramedic team to the scene and to start treating them with critical interventions at the scene before they even leave where they had their injury, and then continue to do it in the Chinooks and the big helicopters on the way into hospital. So they continue giving them their advanced interventions, including blood transfusions. Traditionally, we haven't had that in this country. Thankfully, it is changing. And hopefully, by the time I finish talking tonight, you realize that actually we are getting better at treating people aggressively, as we call it. And it's a sad fact that actually one of the leading causes of death in this country is to young people. But don't we live in a beautiful part of the world? I mean, these are pictures taken around and near the valley here. This is Ullswater here, one cold winter morning. And this is on a summer morning. We live in the most gorgeous part of the world. I'm sure that's why we all live here. And visitors flock to this area to come and do their outdoor activities, quite rightly so. But unfortunately, these sort of things happen. People with an increased number of traffic on roads, with the A66, M6, that sort of thing, these sort of accidents happen. These are all pictures of jobs that I've been to over the years where people are very seriously injured. These look absolutely horrific. Thankfully, the people in these cars here weren't that badly hurt. There was a child in a car seat in the back, but they were thankfully cuts and grazes and nothing too life-threatening. But you know, all sorts of things do happen. So in this area, and certainly based at Penrith, when I first came as a GP to Penrith, to the Birkbeck practice, there was in existence a precursor to BEAT called the Penrith and District Accident Scheme, which was actually set up by my father, who was an A&E consultant at Carlisle for many years, and one of the predecessors in the practice that I was working in, Dr. Barr. And they set up this scheme where all the local GPs would have a kit bag of medical kit, and they would have a green light for their cars and a fluorescent yellow jacket. And the scheme, the accident scheme, paid for all of that, but it wasn't really working very well. There was not much engagement from local doctors. So when I came to practice, I said, look, I think we should do better than this. And they said, fine, if you want to set it up, you set it up. So I did, and I coined the phrase the BEAT doctors, which at that time, initially when it was set up in 1994, stood for the Birkbeck Emergency Equipment for Patients. It was Birkbeck purely because the Birkbeck practice doctors set it up, not that we just treated Birkbeck patients. We treated anybody that was unfortunate to have an accident. And so it provided an extra level of equipment, and we bought a vehicle at that stage, but unfortunately sold that a few years ago because it was getting a bit expensive, and we had paid for it ourselves. It wasn't sponsored. Then in 2000, we became a registered charity. In 2005, we became a limited company, and we've had a massive amount of local support. I'm sure some of you, hopefully some of you here, have heard of the BEAT Fund or BEAT Doctors. And initially, it started off as costing us £20,000 to £30,000 a year. It now costs about 10 times that. It's about 200,000 a year, and I'll come on to our development shortly. But we have expanded and grown, and it's really doing very well, thankfully. We've helped with basic life support training and educational courses locally over the years as well. So it's not just going out to accidents. And this gives you a rough idea of some of the equipment that we carry. We used to carry old life pack monitors. We've upgraded those, and my new one is over on the back. In fact, I've got some of the equipment on the back there if anybody wants to have a look at it afterwards. Sorry, Zoomers, you won't be able to see that. And a whole variety of medical equipment, including drugs and things, and paying for us to go on training courses, which is really important to keep our skills up. So this was the area that we covered initially. It was sort of basically about 10 or 15 miles from Penrith, roughly around the Eden Valley, and we would come down to Ullswater and things as well. As you can see, the red line there does cover Ullswater. But about 3-4 years ago, we decided that there was no such scheme around the periphery of Cumbria. It was just in the Penrith area, and we should actually, expand and cover the whole of Cumbria. So that's what we did. Our remit of operation now is within the Cumbrian border, essentially. And we changed the meaning of the name BEAT to more about what we do, which is bringing enhanced emergency practice to patients. And we called ourselves BEAT Doctors rather than BEAT Fund. We improved our social media, so we have a big presence on social media. If you want to look us up, we're on all the sort of social media platforms. We pay for a professional fundraiser. It's a group in Cleator, and they basically look at pots of money and grants and things that they can dip into to get donations for us, as well as all the sort of rattling boxes and going to local shows that we do. And we split ourselves up into groups, look at the finance, the equipment, the clinical side, and the personnel side. We've got new PPE and helmets, and we now have 12 doctors. It said on the film 9, we've actually got 12 now. And the skill mix, the doctors that are present in the BEAT Doctors are all experienced, but generally either GPs or consultant A&E, consultant anaesthetists, that sort of level. You have to have done a few years after you've qualified and done your training in order to gain the experience to be able to do what we do pre-hospital. It's potentially quite a risky environment to be in, certainly from the medical point of view when you're dealing with such sick people. So you can't just be a junior doctor. So this map gives you some idea as to where all the doctors are. All the white squares are doctors' names. As you can see, unfortunately, we haven't got many doctors down the west coast, what we call the Wild West. The nearest doctor is a doctor in Keswick called Dr. Ferris, John Ferris, or myself in Penrith. And it could take us a good 45 minutes on a blue light run to get out to Workington, Whitehaven area. But we've been there many times, and if it's in the middle of the night, we'll be calling in the search and rescue helicopter to fly us to the nearest major trauma centres, which from here, from the Lake District, If you're badly injured like that, then the hospitals we want to go to are either Newcastle RVI or Preston. So it's a long way, and by road, even from here, if there was somebody badly injured here, which has happened before, it will take a good hour and a half to get to either Preston or the RVI, which is where they need to go. So we now have 3 liveried up vehicles. These are all sponsored. 2 of them sponsored by the Sellafield Impact Fund, the Social Impact Fund, and one by another charity called the Health Appeal. And they've provided the money for us to be able to buy these cars. We pay for the upkeep of them, but they are absolutely brilliant. So we've got one now based with the Keswick doctors, one with myself, which is outside today, based around the Penrith and Central area, and one down the sort of Kendal and South Lakes area. Our plan this year is to fundraise for a car in the North patch, so around with the Carlisle doctors, so we can have one covering each of the 4 quarters of the patch, essentially. So this is what we spend our money on, essentially. We've as you'll see at the back there, our latest purchase are the Schiller Touch 7 monitor defibrillator, which measures your blood pressure, the oxygen in your blood, the carbon dioxide you breathe out. It can do ECGs, it can jumpstart your heart with a defibrillation. It can even do what we call external pacing. So if there's a condition we call heart block with your heart, so you've had a heart attack and your heart, the electricity is not connecting with the muscle in your heart, we can put pads on the outside and we can pace your heart from the outside. Some people here might have a pacemaker, does exactly the same thing as that. We have a ventilator, and we have a chest compression device. So if your heart stopped, and instead of having to jump up and down in your chest with somebody like the community first responders or the paramedics do, we can put this device on and it does the chest compressions for you, and probably much better. We have ultrasound scanners, we have a wider range of drugs, and also, as I say, the cost is the running of the cars, our insurance, our headquarters, which is now, we've now moved to a very professional building above the NFU in Penrith, next to the station and McDonald's, which is quite handy. And it's nice. And the building they had initially was a converted stable, essentially, in Tyrrell, which was at times cold, had no Wi-Fi, no proper heating. It did have electricity, and it was pretty brassy when we were doing our training on a winter night. So now at least we have a nice warm building which is centrally heated and it's got Wi-Fi, and it's really handy for everybody. So it's nice and professional. This is just a view of some of the kit that we carry. The device on the left is the chest compression device, and the red thing on the right is our monitor. But they're all very expensive bits of kit, as you probably saw from my last slide. You know, the Touch 7 monitor is about £12,000. The ventilator is £15,000. And if we're trying to replicate these throughout all the doctors, you can see the costs soon add up. This is just a picture of one of the doctors at the roadside. This motorbike ended up underneath a trailer, a wagon. Thankfully, he wasn't too badly hurt. I think he'd broken his leg, but that was about it. So what do we get called to? Well, most of the time, probably 75% of our jobs are to road traffic collisions. I put accidents there, I've missed that. That's a bit of a typo. There's no such thing as an accident, apparently. So the road traffic collisions, particularly high impact ones on the motorway, high speed roads, that sort of thing. Falls from heights, scaffolding. You wouldn't believe how many farmers we go through that fall through their barn roofs when they're mending their barn roofs, onto concrete, into slurry. I mean, it's just, you have to work in the most unpleasant of environments sometimes, but you just have to forget about the smell and the muck and just get on with it. Things like crush injuries and sadly drownings. We go to in Ullswater every year, probably 2 or 3 water incidents like this, like drownings every year. Fires. Unfortunately, now that the scourge of our society, the knife crime, is approaching or coming to this area. So we get to go to several stabbings every year. Unfortunately, now there was one fatality 18 months ago up in Carlisle that now. So you know, it's not just London or big cities. And of course, major incidents, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And so this year we went to 317, this 23 rather, we went to 317 jobs. 100 of those are in Carlisle, and the rest, as you can see from the figures there, scattered around various parts of the region. And about half R2Cs and half were medical type calls as well. I was very fortunate last year to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award because I'm a bit of a granddaddy in beak doctors. I've been around a long time, so I was awarded that by the Basics, our national charity this year. And then in November, the beak doctors was awarded the King's Award for voluntary service. It's just like an MBE, but for a charity. I think the Patterdale Mountain Rescue Team got one a year or so two back as well. It's a massive honour. I mean, we don't do the work for these kind of accolades, but it's nice to show that it shows, you know, that we are appreciating, we're doing hopefully the right thing. And as Tim said, we've been doing this 30 years now, so this is our 30th anniversary year this year, which is very exciting for us. I just find a shot of some of the doctors with our logos. So how come we are different from paramedics? Well, there are lots of different things that we can do that paramedics can't do. Don't get me wrong, I've got some great friends that are paramedics and they can do some fantastic things nowadays. They're very well trained and they are really skilled, but they can't do pre-hospital anaesthetics, which is what a lot of us can do. Not all of the beak doctors can. We have a range of skills, but some of us can do pre-hospital anaesthetics, and certainly all the doctors on the Great North Air Ambulance can do anaesthetics, and that's one of the key things that's going to save your life. If you're badly injured and you've got a bad head injury and you're agitated in a semi-conscious state, the best thing for you, what would happen in hospital, is to be put into medically induced coma or given an anaesthetic, and we can do that at the roadside. I've got the drugs here in the room, so if anybody collapses, I can give you an anaesthetic tonight. And we can do surgical things as well. So if your lung has collapsed from trauma to your lung, you've got a pneumothorax, or worse, what we call a tension pneumothorax, we can make holes in your chest. And if, God forbid, you have a stab wound to the front of your chest and your heart, then the only thing, if you get stabbed in the heart, is to open the chest up and basically block that hole and allow the blood to fill your heart again. And we've all been trained to do that. Thankfully, touching wood here, I hope that's wood, I've only ever had to do it once. It's not that common, but it's a life-saving procedure. And we have, as I said, a wider range of drugs. We have ketamine, other things like fentanyl, magnesium, things like this, which are drugs that paramedics can't use. And, you know, I'd like to say that we have, because we have a longer training, we have a variety of training in other areas as well, that we might bring those skills to the roadside. And we can all use ultrasound scanners now. So if we're not sure if you've got a collapsed lung, we can do an ultrasound scan of your lung, of your chest, and have a look to see if it is collapsed. My device is on the table at the back there. And then with the air ambulance, they give blood transfusions now, giving blood transfusions and doing anaesthetics to the roadside, I would say are the two things that are going to save your life if you're critically ill and you've got lots of broken bones, etc. Unfortunately, beak doctors can't have blood in the cars because we're just so spread out, and the accountability of the blood is such that you have to pick up a new box of blood every day, and it's impossible to have it with us all spread out. But the air ambulance can. They have a new pack of blood delivered to the base at Langwathby every 24 hours, every single day of the year. So, you know, it's possible. So if we get to a job and we think the patient needs a blood transfusion as well, we'll certainly, if they haven't already been tasked, we'll ask for the helicopter to come. So essentially what we're doing is trying to stabilise these patients at the roadside or in the ambulance and helicopter on the way into hospital, long before they get to A&E. If you wait till somebody gets to A&E, the clock has been ticking. You're probably outside that golden hour that is so crucial. And in this area, the travel time is so long, they're going to be much worse by the time they get to hospital. It's almost too late. As I mentioned, we do have a national organisation called BASICS, the British Association for Immediate Care, and there are about 100 other schemes like BEAP throughout the country. Not in every region, but in a lot of regions there are. And again, it's all charity funded, we're all volunteers, and so on. So, just a little picture of a helicopter with BEAP at the roadside. Again, stressing we're working together as a team, we're not working individually. Which takes me on to a case history, talking about drowning cases. This one was a job that I went to back in 2019. The ambulance service got a 999 call from a passerby to say that there was a 12-year-old who jumped into the river near Appleby and hadn't surfaced. I was in the middle of my GP surgery then at the time in Penrith, and I got a call on my phone from the ambulance service saying, could I attend? An ambulance was sent along with an RRV, rapid response vehicle, and the air ambulance was contacted as well, but the one at Langwathby was out, so they were contacting the one coming over from Teesside, their second aircraft. So this is where it was. I'm sure everybody knows where Appleby is, but it was right near Appleby, just down from Penrith. And if you take a Google Maps picture of it, that red dot is where the casualty jumped in, right beside a bridge, just along, not far from the doctor's surgery. Right, the building at the top, with the white roof up there, is the doctor's surgery. So the doctor was attending as well. And there just happened to, it's right across the bridge from the retained fire station. And there just happened to be a couple of off-duty retained firemen in the fire station at the time. So at 5 minutes, if you look at the red numbers there, 5 minutes after the call, people were jumping into the water to try and rescue him. And this off-duty fireman had rushed across the bridge, was jumping in the water, and his dad, who was not that far away, jumped in the water, and they're all trying to find him. And the police and the RRV turned up with the ambulance after about a quarter of an hour. And then after 18 minutes, well, I think 20 to 25 minutes under the water, the fire service guy found him on a ledge under the water. So it's nearly 25 minutes under the water. They dragged him out and started doing basic life support. I arrived shortly after that, a couple of minutes later, and did various interventions. And then about 9 minutes after that, the helicopter arrived from the other side of the country. We did all the standard things that we do for this sort of situation. We gave adrenaline, we gave fluids, we were doing chest compressions. I put a tube into his lung to ventilate him. We started trying to warm him up. And then we put him onto that chest compression device I was showing you earlier on. So this was doing continuing to do the chest compressions, pumping the blood in his heart around his body, trying to keep his brain alive. And on that device, and still with that device going, we put him into the helicopter because he hadn't made any sign of recovery at all. And we knew that he was like a hypothermic drowning case. And being a young child, he might stand a chance of coming round. So they arrived at the RBI about 35 minutes after they took off. His core temperature was just 28 degrees. They put him onto a bypass ECMO, they call it, where they warm take the blood out of his body and warm his blood up, put it back in again. And then gradually his temperature came back up to normal. His heart started up on its own. He showed a bit of brain activity, what we call seizure activity. And then eventually after day 12, he was off the ventilator. On the day 21, he went on to a normal ward. And after 56 days, he was discharged home. And I've seen him since then several times. And he's an amazing young lad. He's got a bit of a speech impediment, but apart from that, he is essentially normal. So this guy was effectively dead because he was under the water for like 26 minutes. But the cold had protected his brain, and we kept the blood circulating by putting him on this chest compression device to get him to hospital, to get him properly warmed up, to give him a chance. And he has survived. In fact, it was quite an emotional experience when I left the air ambulance at the end of December, where they had a surprise leaving do for me, which I had no idea was being organised at the North Lakes. And it was a kind of, this is your life type thing. And in the middle of that, they brought up this young lad who's now 18 with his mum. And he stood on the stage and gave a speech. And I can tell you, I was extremely choked up, as were a lot of people in the building, because it was an incredibly emotional experience to see this guy who should have been dead, who was effectively dead, be brought back to life. So it was quite an incredible story. But that's what it was all about. It's teamwork. It was people doing good basic life support to start with, beep coming in and doing our interventions, and the air ambulance doing their interventions, and all working together to save this young boy's life. So what about air ambulances in Cumbria? Like I said, they're all charities. The main helicopter service around this area is operated by the Great North Air Ambulance. They have 2 aircraft, one based at Langwathby, one based over at near Durham Tees Valley Airport. There is also the Northwest Air Ambulance. Very confusing, their names, because people often, they see the GNAS aircraft and they think it's the Northwest Air Ambulance, but it isn't. The Northwest Air Ambulance, they have 3 aircraft, but they're based further south. So one is double paramedic crews one is based at Blackpool. They have a doctor and a paramedic one at Barton Airfield, which is Manchester, and a second double paramedic air ambulance at Barton near Manchester as well. So, and they do come up here sometimes, and certainly if the GNAS aircraft are busy or out of the area or not operational, then they will send the Northwest Air Ambulance ones up here as well. But the thing about the air ambulances are, apart from the fact they're all charities again, relying on donations, the limitations for the air ambulances in this area is they don't fly at night. So if when it gets dark, they get scared and they have to go in the hangar. So, no, don't get scared really, but they're not allowed to fly at night. They only have night vision goggles. If they get caught out in the dark, so if they came to a job here when it was half an hour before sundown, and it took a bit longer to stabilise the casualty here, they can take off and fly in the dark to a lit helipad. So they can fly to the RBI in Newcastle, they can fly to the lit helipad at Preston in the dark, and that's fine. And then they can also fly back to their base, because their base at Langwathby does have lights on the pad. So they can fly from a lit helipad to lit helipad. What they can't do is take off at sunset or after sunset and go into a field or onto a road or something like that. So that's when they rely on their car. And so now the Great North Air Ambulance have a car for the dark hours and also for every single night. So every night there's a car on from 8 in the evening through to 8 in the morning, which has a doctor and a paramedic on. So they have a 24-hour, 24/7 cover, but not always with the helicopter, because as I say, they just fly at daytime. And the other issue about helicopters, certainly helicopters in this area, is that they don't have any winching capability. So when we don't, certainly with Beep, get that involved in mountain rescue things, but the air ambulance guys do, but they can't winch people. So if there's somebody fallen off Striding Edge, or in Brown Cove, that sort of thing, and they're not in a very accessible position, they will rely on the search and rescue helicopters, which I'll talk about in a minute, coming to their aid to winch people. And air ambulances are a bit weather dependent as well, particularly vision. So if it's foggy or heavy rain or blizzards, they can't fly in that. So again, they'll rely on the cars or Beep to help them. So this is one of their aircraft. It's their latest one, the Dauphin. It's a fantastic aircraft. And this is just to show you that the sort of 10-minute flying times from their bases. So the blue circles there are where the GNAS aircraft are based, and the two red circles are where the Northwest Air Ambulance ones are based. Those are 10-minute flying times. But if you double those sides, you can see that in 20 minutes, they could fly to almost anywhere in the north of England. Just a quick picture of well, we do have a spare aircraft. GNAS does have a spare aircraft and a spare car as well. So at one time they put all three up. So like I said, they do, when you're on shift for the air ambulance, like I have been for the last 20 years with Great North, we do a 12-hour shift, but we're only on aircraft for the daylight hours, and then we go onto the car for the rest of the dark bits of the shift. But they are there 365 days a year. One of the other things that the car does do as well at night is they have a thing called a hot retrieval service from the Cumberland Infirmary or West Cumberland. So if a paramedic crew takes one of these very traumatized and badly injured people into Carlisle, so they've missed the pre-hospital bit, but they've gone into Carlisle and they need an immediate transfer to Newcastle, then the GNAS car will go up to Carlisle, take over the patient, and then drive with them in the ambulance across to Newcastle. So this brings me on to the sort of mountain rescue side of things. This is a case that I was involved in 2013, so a little while ago, but it illustrates some good points. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, I was on with the air ambulance, and we got a call to say that a walker had fallen off the coal between, I think it's Mickledore and Scarfell Pike, and had fallen about 50 foot down a scree bank and was seriously injured. It was February time, it was winter, it was cold, it was quite misty and damp. The ambulance service were called, and the Wasdale Mountain Rescue Team were called, and also a Sea King, because in those days we had Sea Kings rather than search and rescue helicopters, which we now have. And we were on base, and we were tasked, set off, and we arrived on scene near the casualty within about 10 minutes of the call coming in. But we circled around, and it wasn't possible to land on the Col where his friend was waving for us because it was too misty at the time. So the helicopter went down into the valley the other side. I jumped out with some bags and walked or scrambled back up to the Col where he was, and then down the other side across the scree slope, and got down about the same time as the Mount Rescue Team doctor arrived. And I found this gentleman was still conscious, lying on the scree slope. It was very wet, slippy. There was swirly mist coming around. And these are pictures that were actually taken. It doesn't look misty here, but the person who took the pictures took them between the gaps in the cloud, I think. But you can see a little red dot. Sorry about people on Zoom. There's a little red dot down here, just sort of the bottom of the picture. That's where the casualty was lying. And there's another picture of him there. It doesn't look very steep in that ground, but believe you me, it was quite steep. So my initial casualty assessment was that he clearly had a chest injury. He possibly had broken his right leg. He was breathing quite rapidly due to the chest injury. He had head wounds. He had a reduced level of consciousness. He didn't look well at all. So we sort of bandaged him up. We splinted his leg, splinted his pelvis, put some drips in, gave him some fluid, some oxygen, and then put him onto the mountain rescue stretcher. Seeking by then had come in, but they couldn't winch because they couldn't get enough height above the crags to be able to lower the winch line. So our helicopter was circling as well, and in a gap in the clouds managed to jump in and land on the Col between Mickledore and Scarfell. So we put him on the stretcher and we carried him uphill, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Normally we go downhill on the stretcher because it's so much easier. But because the helicopter was up on the Col, we had to lift him up the hill, which took us probably about half an hour to do. Once we got up there, we discovered and we reassessed him that he was actually much worse than he was previously. His conscious level had reduced, and the paramedic and I decided that actually we needed to give him a general anaesthetic. Which we did, and that stabilized him. His observations then leveled off, which was great. We put him on the helicopter, we flew him down to Preston, and we were in Preston, which is a major trauma centre, within 90 minutes of the call. That's an hour and a half, which is not bad going really, with him on a ventilator and stabilized. He eventually made a full recovery and came back and thanked us all, which was great. So this is some pictures that somebody took of us on the Col, and you can see the mist around and about, keeping us in. And actually the next picture is even better. So you can see that's why we couldn't get into land initially. Once the mist was there, you can actually take off because you can go up into the mist and above the cloud and then navigate to the hospital. And this was us taking off from the scene. This is what it looks like in the back of the helicopter. There are various types of air ambulance throughout the UK, but the Dauphin style helicopter that we have, that GNAS has, I think is one of the best because, as you can see, you can access the whole of the patient in the back of the aircraft. Some of the air ambulances, you slide them in through like an open door at the back of the helicopter, and you can only get to the top half of the patient. With the GNAS helicopters, you can get to the whole of the patient. So once we've taken off, we can then continue to treat the patient and give blood or reposition their fractured legs or whatever. So, you know, it's really, really handy. And this is how we get them in. We open the side door, swivel the stretcher around to get them in. And this is where we keep the monitor and the oxygen and various other things within the aircraft. It doesn't look a very big space, but it's actually quite a reasonable space compared to some aircraft. And of course, we can park wherever we like. We don't generally pay the parking tickets, but this is, we just park wherever we can, basically, but there has to be enough space. And hopefully they'll let us off a parking fine from that one. So what about air ambulances? What do they do? So essentially, we consider it bringing the A&E to the patient. So they, generally speaking, say the ones in this area bring doctor plus a paramedic, a sort of highly trained paramedic, a critical care paramedic to the scene. And that's the key, really. Quicker treatments. And yes, getting to hospital quickly. But that's not the number one goal. The number one goal is to get the doctor and the paramedic in there to start stabilizing them. And of course, we can then take them to specialist units as well. So if somebody has burns, or we have pediatrics children who are badly injured, we can take them to a centre that deals specifically with them. So in this area, probably if you had a child that was badly injured, I would probably fly south down to Alderhay It's a bit further to fly, but it's a specialist unit. And if you went there by road from here, it would take you probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, I would think. So yeah, it's great. And so, yeah, we work very closely alongside the mountain rescue team. So this brings me on to mountain rescue. Notice I'm just merging one into the other here. So you've got GNAS in the background there with the mountain rescue guys. And yeah, I was part of the Patterdale team for nearly 30 years. And it's, as with all mountain rescue teams, it's free of charge. It's run by fantastic volunteers who give thousands of hours of time every year. They come under the overall responsibility of the police. So it's generally the police that get the initial call. So if somebody's fallen or injured or lost on the hills around here, then you call 999 and it will be the police that generally takes the call, and they will know which team is responsible for which area and which team needs to be called out. And their duties are casualty recovery, searches, and of course being involved in major incidents as well. Now I'll mention major incidents in a few minutes. But one of the first major incidents I went to was the Grey Rig train crash, just near Oxenholme station a number of years ago. And the mountain rescue guys were there, were really helpful. And I had a scribe who was writing down all the things that happened next to me for the whole of the mountain rescue, which was for the whole of the major incident, which was really good. So in the lakes, there's a thing called the Lake District Search and Mountain Rescue Organisation. I believe there are 13 teams now. I'm looking at our mountain rescue guys to confirm that. And we are the busiest area of mountain rescue in the UK. Within the Lake District, the Langdale team is generally the busiest, followed by Keswick, and then Patterdale is generally the third busiest team in the lakes is the Patterdale team. The national scene, there is a National Mountain Rescue Council. There's also the Search and Rescue Dogs Association. There's the Cave Rescue and other organisations as well. So this is what it used to look like with the Sea Kings. This was another job that I went on. Actually, not this area. It was just across at Sharp Edge on Blencathra. We were doing a training thing. The helicopter had landed at Patterdale Base, and we were all in the aircraft when the call came in that somebody had fallen off Sharp Edge. So the pilot took off with myself and Dave Freeborn, the team leader, and I think another couple of members as well. And this is us being winched down to the scene on Sharp Edge. As you can see, it was snowy and icy, and that's a close-up of where the casualty is. The left-hand picture, you can see a red dot in the middle. That's the casualty who had fallen some distance off the bad step on Sharp Edge, those of you that know it. And he'd gone about halfway down to where there's a slight ledge before it falls off even further. And this guy was in a deeply comatose state. He was agitated, restless, thrashing around, a very, very difficult, challenging situation. We managed to get him onto a stretcher and give him some medication to calm him down a bit and to settle him before we then winched him back up into the Sea King helicopter that actually stayed hovering over us the whole time because of this visibility. They couldn't leave because they didn't know they would ever get back to us. So they stayed over us. And all the time we were administering first aid to this guy and putting him on the stretcher, there was this incredible downwash and noise above us. But we got him up into the aircraft and flew him to Newcastle, where he was subsequently treated. Of course, we do, on the team, we do have important people sometimes come to visit, which is quite nice. This is Prince William, who came to visit us many years ago. We carry flares and things to help the aircraft come in. This is just a helicopter coming in. You can tell I'm quite old because I'm still showing all these pictures of Sea King. I think they're amazing, amazing aircraft, the Sea King. You can't beat them. This is a Sea King winching somebody up, and that's what it looks like to be winched up underneath an aircraft. And in the back of the Sea Kings, there was quite a bit of space, and there's about a similar amount of space in the new search and rescue, the Sikorsky helicopters that we now use. But you can move around in here and treat a patient, continue treating a patient. Just one brief story about a job that happened just along the valley from here. Of course, when we're doing training and things like that, we have to go across farmers' land and so on. So they're generally very kind and will let us go across their land to do our training and so on. But the sort of spin-off from that is that sometimes they call us or call the rescue teams to go and help them with their animals that get stuck. And this was a prize bull that went missing just from the Glen Foindale farm and the farmer hadn't seen him for several days and didn't know where he was. Eventually, a walker coming from Air Force along the side of Brown Hills towards Glen Coindale spotted the poor old bull down in this ravine. So we were turned out to do a practice rescue basically on him, and it just happened that Seeking was in the area as well. So we got a vet along who came in, gave him some sedation so that he was a bit sleepy to lift him, put an IV up, gave him some fluids because he was very dehydrated, having been down this ravine for 4 or 5 days. And then they brought this net down, and we just rolled him onto the net and lifted him rather unceremoniously under the helicopter out of the ravine, and he survived, and he put weight back on, and presumably went on to father several other calves and things. So it was quite good fun. So we sometimes the rescue team also rescues sheep sometimes and things off ledges. So we try and help out where we can. This is what a search and rescue helicopter now looks like. This is the SAR helicopter, the smaller one and the larger one that come in to help, and they can fly 24/7 at night in some pretty awful weather, and they do have winching as well. So if you have any serious winching to do or any serious nighttime jobs, we will call on them. And we do call them out. Beat calls them out sometimes to road traffic collisions when there isn't a helicopter, and there's a bit of time, because it can take quite a bit of time to get these guys in. Sometimes usually about an hour and a half before from the call to when they arrive. So if you've got somebody trapped in a vehicle with bad injuries, then actually it's worth thinking about these SAR helicopters, because you've got a bit of time in hand, and they're very useful for flying people directly to a major trauma centre. And this is where the main bases are. I don't know if you can see it so well here, but it's Prestwick in Scotland is generally where they come from to come here. And there's Carnarvon and also Humberside. So we've got sort of 3 bases. But as you can see, that's quite a long way away. And certainly at night, if you call them, they need to get themselves in their gear. They then have a plan of where they're going. They look at the maps and work things out, which takes about 45 minutes. And then from Prestwick or Humberside, whatever, it can take a good 45 minutes for them to fly to the area as well. So that's why it can take an hour and a half. So we're nearly getting there. So just to mention briefly about major incidents. When I first came here to Beat, I did a major incident training course, thinking, well, I'll just tick that course off because sleepy old Cumbria, nothing ever happens in Cumbria, does it? It does. And the jobs on the right there are all major incidents that I've been to over the years. The Shap jet crash, where a Hawk trainer jet came down in the middle of Shap. Sadly, both pilots died, but thankfully nobody else. There was a grey rig train crash where there was 1 fatality and something like 12 or 15 critically injured people, and 95 other people that were of minor injuries, walking wounded. There was the 2 lots of Cumbria floods. There was the Keswick bus crash where a bus taking kids from Keswick school back to the west coast at the end of the school day was impacted with a car that had lost control and tipped over on its side, and there were several fatalities in that. They were all teenagers as well, which was really sad. And then followed by that, there was about a week later, there was the West Cumbria shootings, Derek Bird shootings, which I was involved in as well, trying to pick up people that were injured from the shootings there. This is the Keswick bus crash. The problem with this was, as with a lot of coaches, is that when people sit on a coach or a bus, they don't put the seatbelt on, or the bus doesn't even have seatbelts. But because the kids didn't have seatbelts on as the bus went over, several of them went out the windows and were under the bus. This is the grey rig train crash the day after. It happened at night, and it was cold and dark and wet, as these places always are. But this is what it looked like the day after, where the carriage that's separate on the left there was the lead train, the engine that had come detached. And of course, there are national things that happen as well, like the Grenfell disaster, the fire, and the Manchester bombing, which I was called in for as well. So it took me about 2 hours to get there in a fast response vehicle, an ambulance vehicle. But by the time I got there to the Manchester Arena foyer, where the collecting station was, there was still 15 or 20 people with significant injuries, but what they would term as P2, not quite as serious. But it was a horrendous situation, and it's the only, thankfully, so far, bombing that I've ever attended. But, you know, these things do happen, and there are fanaticists around all the time. One of the things that we dread as pre-hospital responders is that somebody does such an awful thing like the Manchester bomb, but in the middle of Ambleside or in the middle of Keswick. Because if that happened, it would take a long time to get a significant number of medical resources there. I mean, Manchester was bad enough, but they were very near to several big major trauma centres and lots of ambulances very quickly. God forbid what would happen in this area if that sort of thing happened. But that's why we're here, that's why Beep's here, that's why the air ambulance is here, to try and kind of help in those situations. So I like to, this slide is, I'm almost at the end of my talk now. This slide just kind of signifies, I don't know if you can see the yellow thing there, which is the ambulance service, joining up the air ambulance, joining up mountain rescue, Coast Guard, and Beep as well. So I like to think that we're working together as a team. And we do train together, we see each other regularly at the roadside, and it's very much a team effort. So why do I do it? Well, as you probably gathered, it is challenging at times, and you're working in very difficult situations, very difficult environments, but that's part of the enjoyment, if that's the right word, of it, is because it's an immense challenge. It's raw, evolving medicine, so you're not dependent on blood tests, on MRI scans, things like that. You're looking at a patient who's just been injured a few minutes ago, and their pathology is changing with every minute, every second that goes by. So you have to be on your toes, on your mettle the whole time, and it's really amazing. You're using your ears, your eyes, your nose, your gut instinct sometimes. So it can, like I say, it can make a massive difference. Like the farmer I showed you at the beginning, or Casper, the young lad who survived the drowning, it can make a massive difference. Love the teamwork. It's just amazing working together with these guys, these professionals, and we all kind of know what we're doing and we work closely together. And of course, it's hugely rewarding. It really is, because you do feel, you don't want to be too trite about it, but you do feel that you save people's lives or their limbs. So just a couple of final pictures just to show the teamwork element. So this is us all working together. The only service I haven't managed to get in the shot here is the police. They were there, but my camera wasn't wide enough to, they were just behind the ambulance, but I couldn't quite get everybody in. But it was just designed to show helicopter, beep, fire, ambulance and police working together as a team at the roadside, and we all help each other. You can't finish a talk without a sunset, can you? So I put a sunset picture in. We all have websites, and I just realised actually on the way here, I haven't put the Mountain Rescue one. The Mountain Rescue one for the Patterdale team is mountainrescue.org.uk, but the Beep Doctors and Great North websites are there. And we're on Facebook and Facebook, Twitter, and all those sort of social media platforms. And that's the end of my talk. So time for any questions, if anybody would like to.
Wow. I feel in safe hands. Yeah, for someone who's never experienced this type of intervention, you've worked in lots of, I mean, I now understand the complexity, the collaborative will, I mean, just extraordinary, and the sheer professionalism of all the people involved. There's something quite stunning about it. I've got lots of questions myself. I won't pose any myself at the moment. I'll just open the floor here and also on Zoom. Yes, please.
I can't believe you do have time to relax. It doesn't sound like it, but if you did, what do you do to relax?
So the question on Zoom was, do you have any time to relax?
To relax. Very little time, and my wife would agree with that as well. I think I mean, we've always said Beep is very much a family thing, because you can be called any time. And yes, I've turned my pager off for this evening, for this hour and a half. But as soon as I leave here, I'll be putting it back on again, and I'll be available. So there is very little. I mean, but it is a spare time thing. And yeah, certainly when our two daughters were growing up and were smaller, there were times where I just couldn't go, because with little kids, it's bath time or it's food time or they're kicking off time, and you just sometimes can't go. But yeah, it's important to have switch off time. I guess, strictly speaking, the only time I really turn everything off is if we're away out of the area on holiday. So if we were to go skiing or to go to France or something like that, clearly I can't respond from there, so I turn it off.
Yes, please, another question.
You said that the air ambulance get a pack of blood every day, so if that blood isn't used, what happens to that?
Yeah, so
The question.
yeah, the question from the floor is a very good question. That what happens to the blood that isn't used when on the air ambulance when they get a new pack every day? That's absolutely a good question. What happens is the people that bring the new blood the next day pick up the old blood that's maybe not been used, take it back to the RBI in Newcastle where the blood comes from, and that is put frontline in A&E. So that is used first before any other blood. So there's actually very little wastage because the blood that's been out in the community gets put on the front of the shelf in A&E to be used straight away.
Thank you.
Another question from Neil? Yep.
I was intrigued that the chest compression machine can't be used by first responders. What were the reasons for that?
Yeah, so the question for the floor is the chest compression device can't be used by community first responders, and why is that? I mean, I think that's a very good question, and I actually it's a very simple thing to use, and I don't know quite why they can't. At the moment, the only people that carry and use these chest compression devices are qualified paramedics. So you'll find that there will be one on the fast response vehicles, with one on the frontline ambulances, and we carry them with beep, and they have them on the helicopter. They're not actually very difficult to use at all. Yeah, I hope so. I have to say, having brought up the issue of community first responders, I'm 110% pro community first responders. And if you have access to a scheme, please go and join up. We need more CFRs. They do a fantastic job. And if somebody's heart stops and somebody collapses and they get there quickly, which they usually get there long before us, they can bide a bit of time by doing good chest compressions until we arrive to be able to hopefully jumpstart the heart and things like that. So they do a crucial role in those first few minutes for cardiac arrests.
Are there any questions from the Zoom?
Okay.
Can I ask a question, which is, I'm struck by the fact that all these services are provided by volunteers. And we know that the UK is really top level in terms of volunteering from whatever sort of activities, teaching kids football or whatever.
Yeah.
But the sense, I have that sense, is this really right? That such essential services should be run just by volunteers?
Yeah.
I'm sure that Daffodil Mountain Rescue folk and so on have exactly the same question. These people go through so much trauma that it's their passion.
It is.
Is it the right response?
Well, it's an interesting conundrum because, yes, we all do it because we're passionate about it. And that's why we're quite happy to do it in a voluntary capacity. And so many organisations, as you say, like the RNLI, for instance, all these important rescue services and the mountain rescues out in the UK are all volunteers. If we didn't have those, there would be no such emergency service. It would be just ambulance crew trogging up the hillside to try and get to somebody, or I don't know how they go out to sea. But there is an argument that if the government paid for it, then that would be better. But they would be like, the spin-off to that is, if there was an economic crisis like there is at the moment, they'd probably withdraw that funding, so it would all collapse. So from our point of view, actually raising money ourselves is probably the most secure way of doing it. What would be ideal would be a compromise. So if the government could put a pot of money into Mountain Rescue or RNLI without any strings attached, and they won't pull it, then that would be fine. But it's never going to happen.
Because I was struck just before we were talking. You said you have to raise £200,000 a year, just to keep the Shell on the road.
Absolutely,
which is a huge amount of money to raise from public donation.
It is. That's just for beep. The air ambulance, for their 2 aircraft, have to raise 7 or 8 million a year to keep flying. And I don't know whether people saw on Look Around a couple of nights ago on the local news, they did put a thing out there. But I think at the moment, because of the cost of living crisis and so on, I think the air ambulance guys, certainly the GNAS, are struggling a bit to keep up to the level of funding that they need to keep the aircraft going. But it's tough times, and there's only so far that people can spread their pennies, and we quite understand that, but at the end of the day, we can't operate without those donations.
It's a good opportunity to ask you, it seems a fairly obvious question, but we always ask the speaker at the end, what is your appropriate charity?
I think you probably know the answer that I'm going to say, but any of those three charities are worthy charities to donate to, so all is equally worthy. But yeah, my passion is beef because I set it up. But yeah,
sure. Any last questions? Yeah, Gordon.
Yeah. Theo, the future. I mean, are you going to buy yourself a rocket pack?
For me personally, do you mean?
Or how do you see the future developing?
For me myself, or for Beep?
Well, for Beep first, and yourself.
So I'm hoping that for Beep, it'll go from strength to strength, because I'm reaching the end of my career and I'm beginning to wind down. Like I said, I've stopped air ambulance and GP, and I'm going to be going off and do a bit of travelling with my wife and things like that, and tour around a bit, maybe in a camper and that sort of thing. But I'm hoping that Beep will continue and go from strength to strength. It has done in the last 10 or 15 years, and we need more doctors, we need more fundraisers, and we need to grow it even more, because Cumbria is a big area to cover, and the more we have, more likely we'll get that covered. I mean, like I showed at my picture at the beginning, we don't have any doctors down the west coast, so it's a bit of a trek to get there, but vitally important because that's even further from a major trauma centre. So yeah, I'm confident it will continue to grow and get bigger, but we need the support.
Okay, well, I will just sort of close the admin side of this, which is just to thank you yet again for coming, and to say that our next speaker will be someone called Louise La Victoire, who is the head of science at the Freshwater Biological Association in Windermere, and she's going to talk to us on May the 20th, I think it's, Thursday, May the 23rd. It's a bit later than normal for various reasons. So the next talk is May 23rd, and she would talk about the story and the history of the Freshwater Biological Association, and also their work on Ullswater. It's the first time you've had a sort of aquatic talk. So thank you very much for coming, and I'll just, I think, pass the floor to Gordon, our chair, who would like to say a few words of thanks.
Right, yeah, just that's me. Well, what can we say? I mean, just an incredible talk we've received this evening, for which, certainly I as chair would like to give thanks, but not just for the talk. I mean, it really is a lifetime achievement, that award that was presented. It has been a lifetime achievement, and it's been fascinating to receive the talk, and just what you've done for all of us, for the whole community, and for that, really, you deserve all of our thanks, and the thanks of the community. We normally, when it comes to the donation, we split 50-50, but on tonight's occasion, I think all of the monies raised this evening will go to Theo's charity, and so do please give generously. You can see that it does cost an awful lot of money, and you've got to remember, you never know when it's your turn that you might be getting your money back. So
hopefully never.
So hopefully never. And on that note, I'll say it's been nice to meet you this evening, Theo. I hope I don't meet you out on the road in a distant place. But if you could just all join me one last time to say a big, big thank you to.
Just one more note on the donation is you may recall we used to have a sort of donation China thing called Hurdy, and it came with it had an accident at my home as I was counting the money in it. So sadly, all we have here is a basket. But if you wouldn't mind, anyone who wants from the hall to make a donation, please put some money in the basket, and there are various leaflets and so on if anyone wants to either take them free or buy guides and so on. There are also some big leaflets there.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you want to loiter around.
Yeah, I'll go and look about it. Show people what things do.
Thank you very much indeed for coming, and thank you for all the Zoomers who joined us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.